The Israelis are at it again, and it's hard not to reach a conclusion on this. The conclusion being that they keep hitting humanitarian supplies, the Red Cross, and the United Nations on purpose. And that's a very controversial conclusion, because how many quote-unquote mistakes can they make? I've never seen any other country or non-state actor hit the United Nations as much as Israel has. I mean, combined. You know, we've had a couple of Israeli listeners send us emails with, I think, some pretty decent points. But one of the points was, hey, look, everybody makes mistakes every once in a while. The U.S. hit the Chinese embassy, if you remember, when we were bombing Serbia. Yeah, but we don't keep hitting the Chinese embassy over and over and over again and then go, oh, my bad. If you do it one time, then I say, yeah, why the hell would you want to hit the Chinese embassy or the United Nations? It's probably a mistake. But if you keep doing it over and over, now they did it during the war with Lebanon in 2006. They hit a UN school that was used for refugees earlier in the month. Then they hit a UN supply truck and a Red Cross supply truck. And now a major bombing at a UN facility in the Gaza Strip. And get a load of this. They hit it half a dozen times. And the whole time the United Nations is calling saying, stop hitting the facility. We got 700 refugees and United Nations workers in here. And there's nothing but humanitarian goods and food in this place. And we're trying to provide shelter. And then Israel comes back later and says, oh, our grave mistake. Oh, we didn't realize it. Oh, the last time you had it coming because there was somebody in the area. And this time we think there was somebody in the area too. But we went and hit it anyway. And by the way, if you think that wasn't bad enough, they hit it with white phosphorus. Now, when I saw that, even though I've been seeing what's happening in the Gaza Strip, yet again I was incredulous. I was like, no, they didn't hit it 6 times and they didn't hit it with white phosphorus. That's crazy. Bombing a UN facility with refugees in it and lighting it on fire with white phosphorus. That's nuts, right? Well, there's a report from, who is it, BBC here that we're going to see? Or Sky News. I believe it might be Sky News. That absolutely confirms. So let's watch.
Compound in Gaza with what witnesses say were shells of white phosphorus, the most controversial weapon of this war.
We need the shelling to stop. That's what we need. The shelling is inside the compound.
Israel claims Hamas was firing from the compound, but the UN has dismissed that as nonsense and says its staff repeatedly warned the Israeli military that 700 civilians were sheltering there. Most escaped unhurt, but tons of food and medicine went up in flames.
Our forces have clear instructions not to interfere with the UN's neutrality, on the contrary, to facilitate their important humanitarian mission.
Please.
Hamas has a track record, a documented track record, of abusing UN neutrality and of abusing UN positions, using them as human shields.
Secretary General.
The timing could barely be worse for Israel. The UN Secretary General arrived to press for a ceasefire, just as his staff in Gaza were coming under fire.
I conveyed my strong protest and outrage to the Defense Minister and the Foreign Minister and demanded a full explanation. Defense Minister Barak said to me it was a grave mistake and he took it very seriously.
It wasn't the only military mistake of the day. Journalists were hit in a building that the Israeli forces know houses the local media. And in the hospitals, there was the now grimly familiar parade of bloodshed and suffering. More children among the casualties of the latest attacks. Israel is escalating its offensive in Gaza, heading deeper into the crowded urban areas in what seems to be a final push. A military victory over Hamas is certain, but Israel could emerge from this with its image battered, leaving a devastated Gaza behind.
Now, later in the day, the Israelis also hit a hospital in the Gaza Strip, and I believe it's called the Quds Hospital, and now over 1,100 dead in the Gaza Strip, including nearly 300 children. That total might have increased already over the last day. and over 400, nearly 500 civilians. Now that total keeps changing, keeps moving up every single day of the assault. And as you saw there, the Israeli spokespeople say, oh, we never intend to hit civilians. We keep hitting a lot of them, but we never intended. And who could have known that we fire white phosphorus in the middle of a city and it winds up burning people? Oh, couldn't have imagined that. But Hamas always targets the UN. Really? Fill me in. I literally don't know when Hamas hit the UN. The UN is all over the Gaza Strip. If Hamas wanted to hit it, they could hit it any day, all day. They're standing right next to it. The UN is trying to help the civilians there. So Hamas does not hit them. But Israel does, over and over again. Now, if you had told me before this and before what happened in Lebanon, oh, Israel will intend to hit UN areas and food supplies and where refugees are sheltered, not only would I not have believed it, I honestly would have thought, this guy's a little questionable. I don't know if, he might hate Israel so much that he might even be anti-Semitic. Now, that's a heavy charge, but it would have gone through my mind. But now the evidence is it. They do it, and they do it repeatedly. And by the way, it's not just the United Nations. They hit a charity the day before. It was a Gaza clinic run by the Near East Council of Churches. Now, how many clinics, how many Red Cross and UN trucks and buildings, etc., can you hit before you think, hey, maybe they're doing it on purpose? Now, it took this many for me to think that they're doing it on purpose, but then Thomas Friedman explained it in the New York Times. He thinks that there are two possibilities. One is that Israel is going for the eradication of Hamas. The other, and he hopes that that's not the case just because he thinks it's unrealistic and that it won't help Israel. He thinks the other possibility is that they're going for the quote-unquote, you're going to love this term, the education of Hamas. Now, what are they going to educate them on? Educate them on how many civilians the Israelis can kill so that you stop doing this. So give a heavy enough punishment. And he explains in his article that he doesn't think that Israel lost the war in 2006 in Lebanon. He thinks they won by showing Hezbollah how much damage they can inflict. Now, I want to give you a direct quote from the article so you get a sense of what he means. He says, and again, this is Thomas Friedman from the New York Times, Israel's counter strategy was to use its air force to pummel Hezbollah, and this is in 2006, and he is using an example of the same tactics they're using now in 2008 and 2009. And while not directly targeting the Lebanese civilians with whom Hezbollah was intertwined, to inflict substantial property damage and collateral casualties on Lebanon at large. It was not pretty, but it was logical. That's what Friedman says. That is his opinion. Israel basically said that when dealing with a non-state actor, Hezbollah, nested among civilians, the only long-term source of deterrence was to exact enough pain on the civilians, the families, and the employers of the militants to restrain Hezbollah in the future. And Friedman goes on to explain in the article that Israel did do that Hezbollah is more reluctant to join the fight now. As you see it raging with Hamas, Hezbollah has not joined in. Why? Because Israel successfully educated Hezbollah by killing enough civilians within their areas. Now, if that is indeed Israel's intent, as Friedman believes, and now that is by the way, the kinder intent. The other option, the other choice, is the eradication of Hamas, which takes even more damage, etc. If that is really their intent, it is atrocious. It is saying, and by the way, I don't see how it is any different than terrorism. Because Hamas says, well, look, in fact, I have a direct quote from one of the Hamas leaders. He was interviewed by Counterpunch, Alia Ria of Counterpunch, and Alexander Coburn of The Nation. And his name is Khalid Mashal. And this is what he said. Unfortunately, the insistence on violent repression by our assailants leads to innocent blood on the street. Since 1996, 12 years ago, we have proposed to exclude civilian targets from the conflict on both sides. Israel did not respond to that. Now, when Israel insists on killing our kids, our elders, and senior citizens and women, and bombarding houses with gunships, F-16s, and Apaches, when Israel continues these attacks, what is left for the Palestinians to do? They are defending themselves with whatever they have. Our Qassam missiles and rockets are very crude, hence we fire them within their own capabilities, in reaction to Israeli atrocities. if we had smart missiles, and we wish that some countries could give us these, rest assured that we will never aim at anything except the military targets. Now, do I believe one of the leaders of Hamas? Do I think he's coming at it with good intent? No, not necessarily. You got to take it with a tremendous grain of salt. That being said, he's right. They don't have the smart bombs. Israel does, and they still don't use them. Or they happen to accidentally hit a lot of targets. Young Turks.